It will be in order. Are there any amendments? For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The gentleman will send his amendment to the desk, please.
You got it.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this Act or funds available in the Bonneville Power Administration Fund may be used by the Department of Energy for any program, project, or activity required by or otherwise proposed in the memorandum of Stephen Chu, Secretary of Energy, to the Power Marketing Administrators for the subject line Power Marketing Administrator's Role, and dated March 16, 2012.
The committee will be in order. Please remove conversations from the floor. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On March 16, 2012, the Secretary of Energy issued a memorandum for power marketing administrators. This memo, commonly referred as the Chu Memorandum, has created a great deal of concern among our constituents who rely on power marketing administrations, or PMAs, for affordable and reliable energy. As many of you know, the PMAs are 4 regional power marketing administrations which have been delivering reliable, clean energy to consumers for over 75 years. The PMAs have been successful models of regional collaboration with local stakeholders and a guided principle of beneficiary pays, meaning that whoever benefits from the specific investments in the PMA's infrastructure ultimately bears the cost. The former Secretary's memo directs the PMAs to act in areas involving transmission, expansion, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and cybersecurity, all laudable goals that on the surface I support. In fact, I have strongly advocated for the expansion of transmission here in Congress. However, I believe the Department of Energy's means of these goals, the Chu Memo, would implement a top-down approach that could certainly impose greater costs and risks that outweigh benefits and could undermine the collaborative and low-cost emissions-free nature of the federal power program. This issue has undergone significant scrutiny here in Congress over the past year. Last year, Congressman Jim Matheson from Utah and I led a letter expressing concern over the Chu Memo. That letter was signed by over 160 U.S. senators and representatives, almost evenly split between Republicans and Democrats. Additionally, the House Appropriations Committee approved similar language to what I am putting forth today by voice vote to the 2013 Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, barring the Secretary from implementing the Chu directives. There are a few issues that Congress has had such consensus on in the past. Additionally, the House Natural Resources Committee has held multiple hearings on the memo, and it was a major topic of conversation at our recent PMA FY 2014 budget hearing. Members from both sides of the aisle have expressed concern about how the DOE might move forward with the Chu Memo. It is best if we stop this train wreck from moving forward before it is even implemented. My amendment would simply prohibit the power marketing agencies from utilizing their budgets to implement any new program, project, or activity proposed under the guise of this memo. It is not intended to disrupt any previously existing activities of the PMAs, including the Bonneville Power Administration, that has been conducted in coordination with the support of the customers. It is many of our beliefs that the recommendations of the memo fall far from the DOE's authority under the existing law. If the DOE would like to move forward, this amendment ensures the administration will have to come forward in a transparent manner and request legal authority. I hope my colleagues will support this common-sense amendment that will preserve the existing federal power program and ensure our constituents' electricity costs stay low. I urge support of my amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve. Does the gentleman yield back?
Yes, I do.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word and support the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, we had a similar provision in last year's bill, and we know the concerns are acute in the power marketing regions.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Whitfield of Kentucky. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following new section.
The gentleman has two versions at the desk. Could he identify which version he is?
The one in handwriting.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Whitfield of Kentucky. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following new section. None of the funds made available by this Act.
I move that the reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Is there objection?
Mr. Chairman, I object. Could you continue reading so we know which amendment?
Objection is heard. Clerk will continue to read.
None of the funds made available by this Act under the heading Renewable Energy, Energy Reliability and Efficiency may be used by the Department of Energy for wind energy programs.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, I'd like to explain, number one, why I'm offering this amendment, and then number two, specifically what this amendment does. The reason it is in handwriting was that after we submitted the printed amendment, had a conversation with the parliamentarian, and a suggestion was made to change it, so it was changed. This administration has made it very clear to the American people that it is trying to dictate the fuels used to produce electricity in America. And they've made it very clear that they are flagrantly discriminating and giving preferential treatment to the wind industry. Now, why do I say that? I don't say it because of the $12.1 billion production tax credit that the wind industry received this year, and I don't say it because of the billions of dollars that the wind industry has received in past years. But I say it because the administration has decided not to prosecute the wind industry for violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act or the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act or the Endangered Species Act. In fact, the Obama administration has never fined or prosecuted a wind farm for killing eagles and other protected bird species, shielding the industry from liability and helping keep the scope of the deaths secret, according to an Associated Press investigation. As a matter of fact, to show you how the administration is being very discriminatory in the prosecution of these acts, British Petroleum was fined $100 million for killing migratory birds in the Gulf oil spill. ExxonMobil was fined $600,000 for killing 85 birds. Pacific Corp was fined $10.5 million for killing birds. A utility in Wyoming was fined $100,000 for killing one eagle. And I could go on and on and on. But more than 573,000 birds were killed by the country's wind farms last year, including 83,000 hummingbirds such as hawks, falcons, and eagles, according to an estimate published in March in the peer-reviewed Wildlife Society. Now, we know that this administration is getting the reputation of deciding what federal laws it's going to enforce and which ones it's not going to enforce. And now they are deciding that we are going to prosecute on Endangered Species Act Eagle Protection Act, Migratory Bird Acts, if you happen to be in this sector of the economy. But if you're in the wind industry, we're not going to prosecute you. But you know what is even worse than that? They are now deciding that they want to carve out, and the Obama administration has proposed a rule that would give wind energy companies potentially decades of shelter from prosecution of any birds. The regulation is currently under review at the White House. The proposal, made at the urging of the wind industry, would allow companies to apply for 30-year permits to kill bald eagles, golden eagles, and other migratory birds. Previously, companies were only eligible for 5-year permits. It's basically guaranteeing a black box for 30 years, and they're saying, trust us for oversight. This is not the path forward, said Katie Yumbakubo, a renewable energy attorney with the Natural Resources Defense Council. So why should the American people be giving billions of dollars to this industry and allow this administration not to prosecute them when they are obviously killing thousands of birds in direct violation of the Migratory Bird Act, the Gold and Bald Eagle Protection Act, and the Endangered Species Act? So what my amendment does, it simply says that the $24 million set aside for research and development in the committee report, that it not be allowed to use that money simply because of the extraordinary protection this administration is going to prevent them from being prosecuted under existing federal laws that this Congress has passed many years ago. And that's the purpose of the amendment, and I would respectfully urge members to vote for this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise reluctantly to oppose the amendment because I know my colleague and our friend from Kentucky has an incredible reputation of being friends of animals and birds, and obviously we're concerned about the issues he's raised. Our bill already reduces the wind energy program from $59 million to $24 million, a cut of nearly 60%. His amendment goes a step farther by eliminating the wind energy program entirely, which would result in the termination of the first offshore wind at-scale demonstration in the United States and results in a dramatic drop-off in U.S. deployment of wind energy systems. This setback would come at a time when wind is renewable energy's fastest-growing sector. I oppose my amendment's colleague. I'm certainly aware of his heartfelt concern, and we're listening to what he said, but I still oppose it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
I'd strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I won't take 5 minutes. I think the gentleman misses the gentleman who is proposing the amendment is missing some major points. Before a wind energy project can continue or go into effect, it has to meet very stringent environmental requirements. Those environmental requirements, among other things, deal specifically with all types of birds. And I will tell you that in my current district and in my previous district, I had the major wind farms in California, and no project was allowed to go forward without addressing these issues. Under the Endangered Species Act, it is possible for incidental takes to take place if there is appropriate mitigation. And I know from the projects in my area that there had to be appropriate mitigation. The modern wind turbines are far different than the old wind turbines, which were, in fact, deadly to birds. The modern wind turbines are far less so. And if there is an incidental take of a listed species, it can only occur with proper and appropriate mitigation. Your reference to the author's reference to the issue of a long time take opportunity only occurs if there happens to be adaptive management program in place that allows the Fish and Wildlife Service and other appropriate agencies to review the process and progress or lack thereof and apply different measures or stop the projects at that time. So I would oppose the amendment. I think it is based upon incorrect facts, and I join the chairman in opposition.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment. Last year, wind energy was the largest source of new generating capacity in our country, comprising 42% of all new generating capacity. Overall, America's wind energy capacity grew by 28%. That's an incredible record, and it demonstrates that wind energy is an affordable, reliable source of power that produces no carbon or other air pollution. But the recent success of wind energy in our country doesn't mean we should stop investing in it. In fact, we need to do more, not less, to develop and deploy new wind energy technologies, and we're busy doing that along the Great Lakes. Wind energy will play an important role in the transition to a cleaner energy economy. According to the American Wind Energy Association, this year alone, U.S. wind projects will avoid nearly 100 million metric tons of carbon dioxide being poured into the atmosphere, the equivalent of reducing power sector emissions by over 4%, or taking more than 17 million cars off the road. In addition to cutting carbon pollution, investing in wind energy is a boon to our economy. In 2012, the industry supported more than 80,000 full-time equivalent jobs, including more than 25,000 manufacturing jobs at more than 550 facilities. As the global clean energy economy grows, the United States has a tremendous opportunity to attract more investment here and create even more manufacturing jobs, including in Kentucky and Ohio. But we are at risk of missing out on this opportunity. At a time when the global clean energy market is getting more competitive, the United States has started to lag behind. In 2012, China's level of clean energy financing surpassed our country's for the first time. Year after year, some House Republicans have pushed budgets and appropriation bills that would slash funding for clean energy and energy efficiency programs. This appropriation bill is no exception, and Mr. Whitfield's amendment just takes it one step farther. Eliminating all Department of Energy wind energy programs is exactly the wrong approach, and one that will hurt our nation's competitiveness in this growing market. It certainly isn't consistent with an all-of-the-above energy strategy. Some may argue it makes sense to cut government investment in wind energy since it is a more mature technology than some emerging technologies. But wind energy isn't operating on a level playing field. The United States currently provides enormous government subsidies and tax breaks to fossil fuels. In fact, the International Monetary Fund just issued a report finding that the United States provides more subsidy to fossil fuels than any other country in the world, even China. Our annual subsidies total over, get ready for this, $1/2 of $1 trillion. We shouldn't see the growing global clean energy market to China or make any of our other competitors happy. And let me just say this. I know quite a bit about this because Ohio has been fast about wind energy. I represent the Saudi Arabia of wind in the Great Lakes, which is called Lake Erie. And Lake Erie also happens to be the warmest of the lakes, so it's the bird haven. On the Mississippi Flyway, we have more fish, fauna, and birds than all the other Great Lakes combined. And with that Mississippi Flyway coming up, we have lots of eagles, we have lots of different types of birds. The cormorants are some that are problematic, but nonetheless, we are really a bird haven. And we've learned that the wind turbines don't cause us any trouble. We have to situate them sometimes 3 miles from shore. We have a big trouble. The biggest killer of birds is cats nationwide. And so if you really want to look at where the problem is, maybe we need more cat control. But honestly, for the number of turbines that we've erected, what happens, especially when you have a set of turbines operating in the area, they create an updraft, and the birds, you know, they're pretty smart. They sort of fly above the wind. They're amazing. They float. They float on the pathway that the turbines generate. And in addition to that, there are new technologies like strobe lights that are actually affixed to the turbines, and they keep birds away. It's almost like a silent radar in a way. So there are new technologies that are being developed to deal with that. And we actually want birds, we want turbines, we want clean energy, we want all types of energy in our region. We haul coal out of Kentucky to many of our power plants. So we have an all-of-the-above strategy in our region. But we really welcome the wind opportunities. Cleveland, Ohio, and an investment group called LeadCo is doing everything possible to move additional turbines onto the Great Lakes. So I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. I ask my colleagues to vote against it, and I yield back my remaining time.
Time has expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Kentucky. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no.
Mr. Speaker, I ask
in the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
As
no,
recorded
amendment
vote.
is not agreed to. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 8.
May I ask for a recorded vote?
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Kentucky will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Nevada rise?
I move to strike the last word.
Lady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise this evening to speak on a serious issue that affects my constituents. I've been investigating it since it was brought to my attention several months ago through our local media. The Department of Energy is in the process of moving dangerous radioactive waste thousands of miles across the country from East Tennessee to southern Nevada. This waste is destined for the Nevada Nuclear Security Site, formerly known as Nevada Test Site. This is a totally separate issue now from the proposed Yucca Mountain storage site debate that we have heard earlier today. If you're unaware that this radioactive waste is traveling through your backyard, I'm not surprised. The DOE has failed to properly inform Congress about this activity. The project involves the transport of hundreds of canisters containing high concentration of fissile materials from the Consolidated Edison Uranium Solidification Project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to be dumped in my state of Nevada. The materials are so radioactive that they have a half-life of more than 160,000 years. I want to be clear now, this is not the kind of low-level waste that the Nevada Test Site has been accepting for years. In fact, just weeks ago, I learned that the Department of Energy had reworked the waste acceptance criteria for the security site to allow storage of materials that have radioactive concentrations more than 40 times higher than anything that has ever been brought to the site for disposal before. That revision to the WAC, or Waste Acceptance Criteria, was signed off on by the DOE the very same day that agency officials met with my staff and state and local officials. Yet DOE didn't think it was necessary or important to inform any of us about this change. As a matter of fact, it took an internet search days later to discover that DOE had actually reworked the playbook for the site without any public input. Mr. Chairman, there are far too many questions about what DOE is doing and plans to do at the Nevada Test Site, questions that so far have gone unanswered. Nevadans have had a lot of experience dealing with federal officials throughout the days of atomic testing and during the Cold War. We're not going to just turn aside now and let the DOE run roughshod over our communities. And I can tell you I'm not alone in expressing my concerns about the DOE's activities. Our Republican governor, Broun, has also publicly stated his opposition to the shipments of this radioactive waste. In a letter to the Energy Secretary, our governor stated that classifying this material as low-level waste sets a dangerous precedent. And I would ask unanimous consent, please, to submit the letter to the record from Governor Sandoval.
Lady's request will be covered under general leave.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my district sits just 65 miles southeast of the Nevada test site. The Las Vegas metropolitan area is home to nearly 2 million residents and more than 40 million visitors annually. Any plan to transport waste through the heart of the Las Vegas Valley would be extremely risky and incredibly irresponsible. The stakes are just too high on to gamble on District 1 safety. The DOE has refused to cooperate with repeated attempts to gather additional information so we can have appropriate oversight. It's unthinkable that DOE is moving forward with this program without properly briefing members of Congress. If we are being kept in the dark, who is overseeing the DOE's plans? It's critical that DOE be forthright about how and why the WAC was changed, how the changes relate to the proposed shipment, and how these changes will affect the safety and security of southern Nevada and communities across the country in the path of this transportation. I'd like to thank the chairman and especially the ranking member for allowing me to bring this to the attention of the House, and I would ask them to work with me to ensure that there is proper congressional oversight of DOE and that the people of Nevada and beyond get the answers that they deserve. And with that, I'll yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Will the gentleman specify the amendment that
it is marked on the bottom left as July 10th, 2013.
The clerk will designate the
amendment offered by Mr. Turner of Ohio. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following.
Dispense with the reading.
Without objection. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today to offer an amendment to H.R. 2906. I offer this amendment in response to the President's recent address in Berlin, in which he outlined his plan to further reduce the United States strategic nuclear arsenal below acceptable levels and in contravention of current law. The President's latest proposal would once again call for unilateral reductions in our strategic nuclear arsenal at a time when countries like Russia and China continue to expand and modernize their nuclear capabilities. To make matters worse, the President has taken this most recent effort without the consent of the United States Senate, as required under the Arms Control and Disarmament Act, which states international agreements cannot limit or reduce the military forces of the United States unless enacted pursuant to a treaty or congressional executive agreement. Not only do the President's continued calls for weapons reductions jeopardize the safety and security of the United States, but he compromises the safety of our partner nations. It is unacceptable that the President continues to make secret deals with countries like Russia while at the same time breaking promises with the American people and our allies. The current threat environment around the world is very real and should not be underestimated. A robust nuclear arsenal is critical in deterring against emerging threats like Iran and North Korea. My amendment simply ensures that none of the funds appropriated by this Act may be used to further reduce nuclear force reductions outside of the formal process established under existing law. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I support the gentleman's amendment, and I salute his leadership in this area, both in this Congress and the past Congresses, and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio rise?
I move to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. And to wish to say, first of all, it is unnecessary because there are no funds in the FY14 bill that are allocated to be used for nuclear weapons reductions below the New START levels. The amendment, in my opinion, is constitutionally questionable because it impinges on the President's ability to set U.S. nuclear weapons policy and usurps the President's ability to retire, dismantle, or eliminate non-deployed nuclear weapons. This amendment restricts the President's constitutional authority to negotiate international agreements, including sole executive agreements for arms reductions. And it impinges on the President's authority to determine the number of strategic delivery vehicles needed to meet national security requirements and implement changes in those forces as appropriate. and it limits the President's authority to determine appropriate force structure to meet nuclear deterrence requirements and to set nuclear employment policy, authority exercised by every President in the nuclear age. Frankly, it is bad policy. Blocking nuclear weapons reductions is out of step with post-Cold War and post-9/11 security environment. Secretary Shultz, Secretary Kissinger, Secretary Nunn, and Secretary Perry all have encouraged further nuclear weapons reductions stating in 2007, and I quote, "Unless urgent new actions are taken, the United States soon will be compelled to enter a new nuclear era that will be more precarious and psychologically disorienting and economically even more costly than was Cold War deterrence," unquote. The amendment disregards potential military requirements, including potential strategic command recommendations, and instead imposes congressional requirements. It seems to restrict any reductions below the New START to bilateral negotiated reductions with Russia, so in effect it outsources decisions on U.S. nuclear force structure to Russia. And it requires maintenance of nuclear weapons levels that might be costly and unnecessary in an era of budget constraints. I think that the amendment is poorly written and will not achieve its objectives. It fails to ban unilateral reductions by referencing the ACA Section 303B of the Arms Control and Disarmament Act. It fails to keep deployed forces at 1,550, and as written, it allows the whole stockpile to decline to that level, since that's the limit in New START. This would entail retaining a total stockpile of 1,550 with a deployed force of 1,550, which simply does not make sense. Neither the active nor the inactive stockpile are limited by New START. The treaty limits the number of operationally deployed warheads and delivery vehicles, and while operationally deployed warheads are part of the active stockpile, the size of the stockpile itself is not limited. Supporting 1,550 deployed warheads would require the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy to maintain an active stockpile in excess of 1,550 warheads. New START also does not count non-strategic warheads, so it is unclear whether the amendment intends to count the non-strategic warheads under the New START limit. Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit some additional comments for the record. Obviously, I disagree with the gentleman's amendment and urge my colleagues to oppose his amendment. Now, I yield back my remaining time.
Yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. The amounts otherwise provided by this act are revised by reducing the amount made available for Corps of Engineers civil expenses and increasing the amount made available for Corps of Engineers civil construction by $15 million. The
gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to amend H.R. 2609, the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, for the purpose of addressing several issues in New Mexico. More specifically, my amendment would increase the construction account by $15 million to ensure local governments like the City of Rio Rancho, the County of Bernalillo, and the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District get reimbursed for the work that they have done in conjunction with the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers works with local governments in New Mexico to construct levees, implement flood control measures, and other important infrastructure for the safety of the public. More specifically, the City of Rio Rancho entered into a reimbursement contract with the Army Corps of Engineers and has not been paid back for several years due to the lack of appropriations. The same goes for the County of Bernalillo, the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, and others across the country. This delay in reimbursement has led to interruptions in financing for other city projects and has also the potential to hurt the credit ratings of these entities if they do not recover these funds via reimbursement, as stated in their contracts. By increasing the dollar amount in this account, which includes a number of programs and accounts that are critical to local governments, like engineering, construction, technical assistance, flood control, and environmental infrastructure, we can get these entities reimbursed and get these liabilities off the books of the Army Corps of Engineers to get their projects going. Mr. Chairman, local governments have been left holding an IOU from the federal government for doing work based on good faith RIN agreements with the Army Corps of Engineers. Mr. Chairman, I understand that there may be opposition from the Republican majority, but I'm hoping that I can persuade the chairman to support me in this effort. Section 593 of the Water Resources Development Act of 1999 is under which the City of Rio Rancho and these other local governments entered into agreements with the Army Corps of Engineers. If the Republican majority disagrees with the authority, they should repeal it. But let's make these local governments whole. When city and local governments enter into reimbursement contracts, they expect to be reimbursed. They have annual budgets with the expectations they will get paid back. Congress should live up to these obligations in the authority given to the agency by Congress. And, Mr. Chairman, I understand the constraints that the subcommittee dealt with the allocations given to them, but we need to make sure that we're working to make these local governments whole. Again, going forward, if this is an authority that the Republican majority feels we should do away with, we should do away with it. But let's make these local governments whole. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back to balance my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Move to strike the last word, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in strong opposition to the gentleman from New Mexico's amendment. The gentleman makes the case that there is a need for this infrastructure, and maybe there is. But the Corps of Engineers has no particular expertise or reason for being the funding source. Especially when we're looking at such tight budgets to begin with, we must focus the Corps' funding on activities which have the greatest impact on our economy and public safety, namely navigation and flood control, our historic responsibility. So I must oppose the amendment and urge my colleagues to do so as well, and yield back.
Yield back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Nugent of Florida. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to bring an action against the United States.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And since coming to the House of Representatives a little over 2 years ago, I've made it a priority to revitalize the economy in Central Florida. As a result, I've had the opportunity to meet with community leaders in my district and surrounding areas to talk about projects that matter the most to them: dredging of canals, building of new roads. Again and again, I find, however, that the Army Corps of Engineers is slow-rolling many of these projects, not because they want to, but because they're forced to. The Corps continue to move the goalpost on these communities, and once permits have been given and work's already been done, the Corps has come back with fines and penalties and mitigation. When I ask the Army Corps what happened or what's happening with these projects, it's the same thing. I constantly hear from the Corps that they're worried about being sued. They're worried because the advocacy groups all over this country are dedicated to doing nothing other than taking away Congress's responsibility for setting our nation's laws, regulatory policies, and giving it to the courts or the executive branch. These activists don't want people of the United States of America or their elected officials to have any say in how this country is run. They want to force their own agenda on everybody else through the courts. And even more disturbing, they're doing it with taxpayer money. These groups receive federal grants, and once they take the Army Corps or EPA or any other agency to court, they oftentimes get a cash settlement or a payout to go away. That money goes back into the litigation system, furthering the problem. Take, for example, a group, Earth Justice, which in their tax year of 2011 nonprofit 990 tax form described themselves as a public interest law firm dedicated to pursuing far-reaching big impact litigation. In that filing, Earth Justice uses phrases like litigation, our lawsuits, over a dozen times. Their 2011 filing includes 7 pages of attorney fees that have been awarded to them, and that document celebrates the fact that because of the work, the federal government is forced to back down. They have an entire section dedicated in their work to stop the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. Moreover, they're doing it with our money. Groups like this get federal dollars for grants. Then they use the money to help fund lawsuits against the federal government and these agencies. And guess what? They take that settlement money that we pay out and to the tune of $5 million in 2011 for just one group, one advocacy group, Earth Justice. And guess what? That money comes from the pockets of the American people. Whether or not you support the policy goals of groups like Earth Justice, every single person in this room should be worried about their tactics. Their self-stated mission is to take regulatory power out of the hands of Congress and hand it to the courts. The goal is diametrically opposed to the vision our founding fathers had. Nobody in this chamber should support abdicating our constitutional responsibilities to activists who then charge the tab back to United States citizens and come back asking for even more money. Madam Chair, I appreciate the work that the chairman has done in moving this particular bill through. In discussions with the chairman of the committee, we're going to withdraw this amendment because I believe that we can work together to try to resolve this fact that these groups shouldn't profit on the backs of American taxpayers, blocking justice and the ability for these places, communities that I serve and others in this great nation, the ability to create jobs. And with that, I withdraw my amendment.
Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
At the end of the bill, amendment offered by Mr. Engel of New York. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to lease or purchase new light-duty vehicles for any executive fleet or for any agency's fleet inventory, except in accordance with Presidential Memorandum, Federal Fleet Performance, dated May 24, 2011.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On May 24, 2011, President Obama issued a memorandum on federal fleet performance that requires all new light-duty vehicles in the federal fleet to be alternate fuel vehicles, such as hybrid, electric, natural gas, or biofuel, by December 31, 2015. My amendment echoes the presidential memorandum by prohibiting funds in the Energy, Water, and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Act of 2014 from being used to lease or purchase new light-duty vehicles, except in accord with the President's memorandum. Our transportation sector is by far the biggest reason we send $600 billion per year to hostile nations to pay for oil at ever-increasing costs. But America doesn't need to be dependent on foreign sources of oil for transportation fuel. Alternative technologies exist today that, when implemented broadly, will allow any alternative fuel to be used in America's automotive fleet. The federal government operates the largest fleet of light-duty vehicles in America. According to GSA, there are over 660,000 vehicles in the federal fleet, with over 14,000 being used by the Department of Veterans Affairs and other departments. By supporting a diverse array of vehicle technologies in our federal fleet, we will encourage development of domestic energy resources, including biomass, natural gas, agricultural waste, hydrogen, renewable electricity, methanol, and ethanol. When I was in Brazil, I saw how they diversified their fuel by greatly expanding their use of ethanol. When people drove to a gas station, they saw what a gallon of gasoline would cost and what an equivalent amount of ethanol would cost, and could decide which was better for them. I want Americans to make the same choices. If they can do this in Brazil, we can do it here. We can educate people on using alternative fuels and let consumers decide what is best for them. Expanding the role these energy sources play in our transportation economy will help break the leverage over Americans held by foreign government-controlled oil companies, and will increase our nation's domestic security and protect consumers from price spikes and shortages in the world oil markets. I have introduced, along with the gentlewoman from Florida, that would also take a major step in this direction, and I think that this policy is something that we need to move. So I ask that everyone supports the Engel Amendment.
The gentleman yields back.
I yield back.
At this time. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5
minutes. Please to accept the amendment from my friend from New York State and his annual advocacy on behalf of this cause. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The amendment from the gentleman from New York is currently pending.
Okay.
He has withdrawn.
Elliott.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Madam Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Garcia of Florida. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. The amounts otherwise provided by this act are revised by reducing the amount made available for Corps of Engineers civil expenses and by increasing the amount made available for Corps of Engineers civil construction by $1 million.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My amendment seeks to increase funding to the Army Corps of Engineers Civil Works Construction account by $1 million to support flood and storm damage reduction efforts. With hurricane season underway, it is important that we support the Corps' critical efforts in this area. In H.R. 2609, Chairman Frelinghuysen has provided the Corps of Engineers with $1.3 billion for projects that can mitigate natural disasters, including hurricanes, storms, and floods. Having lived through Hurricane Sandy, I know the Chairman is well aware of the value of these investments, and I would like to thank the Chairman and the committee for their efforts on our behalf. By providing this additional funding for the Corps to conduct important activities, my amendment demonstrates a commitment to addressing the threat of severe weather events and flooding. The Corps has undertaken a number of important flood projects throughout the country, and we must continue to provide the funding we need to support these efforts. Again, I appreciate the efforts of the Chairman and his committee's work in crafting this bill and supporting the Corps' important work, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek
Madam
recognition?
Chair, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Pleased to support the amendment, and let me thank the gentleman from Florida for his advocacy for his own congressional district and his state, and I commend him. Yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Fleming of Louisiana. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to pay the salary of any officer or employee to carry out Section 301 of the Hoover Power Plant Act of 1984, 42 U.S.C. 16421A, added by Section 402 of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, Public Law 111-5.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I rise today to offer an amendment that would stop a loan program created by the infamous 2009 stimulus bill. As I and many others have pointed out, when the bill was passed, the stimulus, which was billed as funding shovel-ready programs, actually became a vehicle to bake in higher levels of spending and new government programs. As with other government loan programs, we've all too often seen abuses and mismanagement, and this program is no exception. The elimination of the Western Area Power Administration's Green Transmission Borrowing Authority was recommended in the report to this year's House budget. And so if you voted for the budget, I would urge you to support this amendment as well. I also want to thank my colleagues, Mr. McClintock, Chairman Hastings, for their work in the offering and marking up of a bill last year to repeal this program. As the budget report notes, quote, the $3.25 billion borrowing authority in the Western Area Power Administration's Transmission Infrastructure Program provides loans to develop new transmission systems aimed solely at integrating renewable energy. This authority was inserted into the stimulus bill without opportunity for debate. Of most concern, the authority includes a bailout provision that would require American taxpayers to pay outstanding balances on projects that private developers failed to pay. This bailout provision is particularly problematic because in November 2011, the Department of Energy Inspector General issued a lengthy management alert on this stimulus borrowing authority. To quote from that report, because of a variety of problems, the project is estimated to be 2 years behind schedule and $70 million over budget, essentially out of funds and currently at a standstill with no progress being made. Western had not completed a formal root cause analysis and corrective action plan designed to ensure more effective program safeguards are in place going forward. Because Western has committed $25 million in developmental funding to a potential $3 billion project, that would ultimately require an investment of $1.5 billion in Recovery Act borrowing authority. We are issuing this report as a management alert, end quote. Madam Chairman, this IG report speaks for itself, and I urge my colleagues to support the repeal of this failed stimulus program, and I reserve the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Louisiana reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman cannot reserve. Does the gentleman wish to yield back?
Yes, I do, Chair.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition?
I rise to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, I rise in strong opposition to the gentleman's amendment. I'm not quite sure why he's doing this, but you know, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act provided $3.25 billion in borrowing authority to modernize the electricity grid. I believe your amendment focuses on WAPA, the Western Area Power Marketing Authority, solely. Is that correct, sir?
Lady will yield that is correct.
That is, I thank you very much. Now, I don't live out there. I'm from a part of the country that doesn't have one of these, but most of America is covered by power marketing authorities. If you really look at the California, if you look at the TVA, regions of the country that have these borrowing authorities. And the way they work is that the ratepayers then pay back over time the costs of that investment. We have to invest and modernize our grid. That part of the country is growing, and frankly, they have been returning dollars at a fairly steady rate. I looked at those figures about a year ago, and with the increase in renewables in the West, there's also a need to alter the grid and its ability to accept new forms of power. That part of the country is growing. The population is just exploding out there. And so therefore we're going to have a greater use of power and more of a need to put it onto the system. So I don't see why the gentleman who comes from Louisiana, now I know you got a lot of oil drilling down there in the Gulf, and a lot of us have voted for that, but I don't really understand the purpose of the gentleman's amendment. I'm happy to yield to the gentleman.
Yes, I thank you. You know, these companies, they certainly are welcome to borrow money and invest it themselves. This puts the taxpayer on the hook, and they're not delivering on these loans. They're well behind, and eventually the taxpayers, as in so many cases from this stimulus bill, are going to be picking up the tab. If it's so valuable and it returns investment over time, then fine, let them use their own capital. And yield back.
All right. Well, I hear what the gentleman is saying, but they actually do pay it back through usage, just like you pay a utility bill and it goes back to the company. Essentially, WAPA is a company, and it borrows and then it pays back. And so these funds are going to be paid back over time. I wish I had one in my area. I think it would really help us out a lot. But I have to oppose the gentleman's amendment, and I think it would be very counterproductive to hurt any part of our country and their power grid system, their ability to modernize their power grid system. The gentleman has, I think, Southeast Power Marketing Authority. I don't know if that covers Louisiana or not. but different parts of the country have different systems that are in place, and I wouldn't want to take away the West's ability to power themselves and to do so in a very cost-effective manner. I yield to the gentleman.
Yes, I thank you. And again, I would just have to say there's a dynamic to money, and yes, some of it may be paid back, but at the end of the day, if the money is not fully paid back or paid back at the appropriate rate, and the taxpayers have to make up the difference, then I would say that certainly in the private sector that wouldn't work out, and I think that we should hold government, non-government, all those who handle money, and particularly taxpayer money, we need to hold them to the same standard, and they're not delivering on that return of investment.
Well, I would beg to differ. Reassuming my time, I'm glad the gentleman stated that, but I think that you will hear strongly from them that they in fact are paying back, and they have a good rate of repayment. I remember our former colleague Norm Dix, if I said anything against Wapaboy, I'd be in big trouble. And because they do have a very good rate of repayment back, and in fact, they have returned money consistently and paid back their original loan. So I think that they're free-floating now, and I think they have a very, very good record. So I would oppose the gentleman's amendment very strongly in support of our colleagues in the West and their need for power and modernizing their electricity grid. And I urge my colleagues to vote against the gentleman's amendment, and I yield back my remaining
The
time.
gentlelady from Ohio yields back the balance of her time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote, please.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I have an amendment.
The clerk will report the amendment. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 28, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Garamendi of California.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to commend the staff, the chair, the ranking member, and all of those who have worked so hard over the last couple of days to get this bill processed and to deal with all the amendments. It's been an arduous task and one that has created, I am told, far more amendments than had ever been presented on any such appropriation bill in the past. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that this appropriation bill is a direct result of what we fondly call, or not so fondly call, the Ryan Republican budget. This is really the first opportunity that America has to see the effects of a very austere budget, one that really decimates programs all across America, programs that are of great value and great utility. This particular subcommittee was presented with the mark, that is, the amount of money that it had available to it as a result of that budget that was passed by the majority in this House. Now, that budget's not law. There has been no conference committee. In fact, the majority in this House has refused to set up a conference committee, that is to put in names for that conference committee. So this is really a one-house budget that is being carried out here with this legislation. It is a remarkable and an extraordinarily important moment in which the American public has a chance to see exactly what austerity as presented to us by the majority means. It means that those research programs that allow America the opportunity to advance its energy programs, to take control of the energy programs of the future, the renewable energy programs, the nuclear energy programs, and on, those opportunities are lost. Now, I know the committee was faced with a very stringent budget, an austerity budget. They made decisions that are, in my view, extraordinarily detrimental to America. Specifically, a decision to take the money that was available to remove it from those programs that are the energy future of this nation: wind, solar, conservation, biofuels, automobiles that are efficient, houses that are efficient, programs that are absolutely crucial to this nation's future and to the world's future because they deal specifically with climate change. The committee decided, the majority that is, decided to move money from those programs to the nuclear weapons program, to programs that are not needed. Consider for a moment that the United States has over 5,500 nuclear bombs sufficient to end life on this planet. It's over if those were to be used. And the military says we don't need them. Programs that are inefficient, ineffective, and are the sinkholes of American taxpayers' money. The majority decided to move the money there. Okay. Who are we going to use those things on? We can't. We don't need them for deterrence, but yet that's where the money goes. Not only does the money come from those energy programs that we absolutely need for our future and for our economy's future, the money comes from programs that are absolutely essential for the well-being of Americans today and tomorrow. The Army Corps of Engineers protects our citizens with its levees and with its flood control projects. We've heard this over and over again for the last 2 days. And yet the majority continues to insist to spend the money on these nuclear weapons, not on those things that are essential for today's life, essential for the well-being of people now as the storm season arrives here on the East Coast with hurricanes, in the Gulf states with hurricanes, and in my state of California, in my district, where I have more than 1,500 miles of levees. People at risk. This amendment would take $100 million from these weapon systems and put that money directly into the Army Corps of Engineers constructions account so that the Army Corps of Engineers can protect our citizens today. I ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Has expired. For what purpose is the gentleman from New